Good morning. Hey, you're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9, the sales tax referendum. Yes, the 1 cent tax, which it was deceptively called by schools here in the McLean County area. We're talking all things sales tax referendum. It asks voters to approve a 1% sales tax on top of all the other taxes you're currently paying. We are bringing on the expert, Dean Fletcher. He's kind of done a lot of research around the sales tax referendum. There's currently a McLean County Sheriff investigation going on looking into alleged election interference. They're focusing on internet posts that were made, according to Matt Lane, the sheriff. But to directly quote him, he said, hang on, let me find this. Matt Lane, he actually says that, hey, this could actually be a little bit more than what we're looking at as far as the internet posts. At least that's the way I understand it. The main issue we were presented with were the internet posts made by the school district. There may be more to it, but those issues are being investigated by a detective. So Dean Fletcher, a concerned citizen and a taxpayer, joining me to talk sales tax referendum. Good morning, Dean. How are you?
Well, Kat, thanks for having me, and how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. So we're going to start kind of talking about the sales tax referendum and what it actually is. So for our listeners, can you kind of talk about what they're asking for exactly and why we should vote no? Obviously, you're an opponent of the sales tax referendum. Me too. I don't like paying taxes either. Great thing is it's not on my ballot. I live in Logan County, so they're not
Oh,
putting
well,
that on the
lucky
ballot
you,
here.
lucky you.
Yeah. So tell me about why listeners should vote no, and what really are they asking for? 1%. I know it's been commonly called the 1 cent tax. So start there for me, Dean.
Yeah, so the technical term is the county facilities sales tax. And it allows schools to add an additional, propose to the voters an additional anywhere from 0.1% up to 1% sales tax on most of the goods and even services that you purchase and are normally taxed on in the county. There are a few exceptions, like it can't apply to food, vehicle sales, or medicine, but pretty much everything else is up for game. So, furniture, if you're going to buy clothing, if you're buying gasoline, right? We already have insane gas taxes in Illinois, and this will only make it more expensive in McLean County to buy gasoline. Taxes on restaurants, services, anything that is taxed besides those very few small segments that are exempt by state law, it's up for grabs. In the sales tax itself, there are some state limitations on what it can go towards and how it can benefit the schools. So it's a big chunk of it is allocated towards like building costs, normal wear and tear, HVAC replacement, get a new roof, even build potentially a whole brand new school building. Another portion can go towards safety, so think like metal detectors, security cameras, or even paying for the salaries of the school resource officers, the police officers that are on campus at the various public schools. And then the final thing it can go towards is mental health. So that would be student mental health, so they can use to hire more social workers, school psychologists, do additional mental health programs for the students themselves, because we all know the mental health of our youngest and most vulnerable generation, kids in K through 12, is just absolutely dismal. A lot of
Mhm.
that has to do with social media and cell phone use, but I won't go off on that tangent right now. But so yeah, that's what the sales tax is, and that's what it can be used for. Um, the school districts have also, the school boards have proposed a resolution that passed, and I don't know how legally binding it is, but essentially they promised to use 1/3 of this, the sales tax revenue that's collected over 5 years, towards property tax abatement. So essentially they will lower all the property tax amounts in the in the county by up to 1/3 of the revenue. So essentially, they're trying to, in my opinion, the school boards are trying to bribe the voters by offering them like a temporary discount on their property taxes if they add a brand new sales tax, which is just kind of odd logic. Like, here, increase your tax by $1, and then we'll give you 33 cents back for just 5 years. But your taxes are still going up in those 5 years, and they're going up a full dollar for the rest of time, essentially. I don't think there's any sunset clause I can see in this sales tax, so it is a permanent sales tax increase. And I don't know, for our viewers here, how many are aware of, or intimately aware of the sales tax that we have here in Illinois. There's this great document here that I don't actually know who created it.
Folks, you can always come onto YouTube and we have all the resources for you. Dean has gathered the resources. You can come to the YouTube channel, subscribe while you're here. And Dean Fletcher, he's got all of these different graphics. Later in the show, we are going to be unpacking various email chains back and forth between Barry Riley's PAC. We've talked about it here on the program. He's making $200,000+ in a pension, folks. Okay. And I hate to say it, but it's the pension, stupid. That's why they're trying to pass this 1% sales tax, right? Because we have an unfunded pension liability here in the state of Illinois and they want to secure their pensions. And yes, the sales tax has to go towards all of these things that you're talking about. But if the new revenue is going towards all those things, then they've freed up some revenue to put towards other things. So that's the bigger picture here that I want our listeners to grab onto. So head to YouTube. We've got this infographic here, right, Dean?
Yep. So it essentially highlights the fact that Illinois is dead last when it comes to our tax competitiveness. We have the highest combined state and local taxes out of any state, including Washington, D.C., of all places, the swamp itself. We have the highest tax burden. For a median U.S. taxpayer in Illinois, it is over $13,000 per year that we're paying in combined state, local taxes. That includes sales tax, which in McLean County right now in Bloomington and Normal, it's 8.75% on most purchases. We have a 4.95% income tax rate. And then if you own a house, or if you pay rent, you're paying your landlord's property taxes for them. So that all combined, it comes out to about 16.6% effective tax burden for people that live in Illinois, compared to just 10.9%. Nationally. So that's kind of where we are right now, and that's for the median household. Yours may be more, your may be less, but that's kind of what we're looking at right now. And this sales tax, it would increase that sales tax for McLean County, most every purchase and service and restaurant you go to in the county by an additional 1%. So that 8.75% would go up to 9.75%. That's almost a 10% sales tax rate. Just that increase is like a 14% increase from 8.75% to 9.75%. So that's a big jump right there, and that's going to really hit families, people on fixed income like retirees and seniors. Sales tax is the most regressive form of tax, so it impacts the people that can afford it the least the most. So that's people who are, like I said, people on the lower end of the income spectrum, and there are loads of people that are least able to afford it. So.
Well, and then, I think it's interesting. This has been promoted through, I'll just say it, the propaganda on april1cent.info, the website that was featured on all those district websites. We're going to get to that, and that's where the investigation by the McLean County Sheriff's Office kind of stems from, are those internet posts. But they talk about this 33% of the sales tax revenue is going to be generated from commuters. Can you talk about that a little bit, Dean, where they're saying, it's all going to be coming in from people who are not even living in McLean County, so the burden's not going to be on you, is essentially what they're trying to pitch you.
Yeah, I haven't seen like the actual statistics or an Excel document to prove out those numbers, so I'll take it at face value that maybe they're not lying. Who knows? But essentially that means that, sure, we might, some more people coming out of county, driving through when they stop at, an IHOP or at a McDonald's on their way through, or fill up at the gas station, we potentially be taking some of their money. And their argument is like, all these other counties, I think it's like 60% of counties in the state have this similar 1% school sales tax added on. And you pay for it you're paying it when you go to a U of I game, or when you drive into Peoria, you're paying for their schools as well. But the fact of the matter is, like, we're going to raise our taxes and the county will relive, and we won't be able to escape it every day. We'll be stuck paying this sales tax on your Amazon purchases. You're ordering stuff off of Sam's Club, minus the food, of course. But we won't be able to get away from it. So why would we want to add something like right now, people can get away from it. They can come to McLean County. Maybe they'll be less likely to come to McLean County to purchase because the sales tax is higher now. So
Yeah,
that may be true. It may not be true. I could see circumstances where it could change. Everything is dependent on the specific circumstance. But regardless, you're going to be paying it. It's going to be coming out of your pocket, no matter that there might be some extra money tossed in from some guy driving up the 55 from St. Louis to Chicago when he gets gas.
yeah, exactly. And not to mention, I don't know if that's necessarily something the school district should be touting, in that, those people are not going to be benefiting directly or even indirectly. So sometimes, the argument could be made that you, Dean, you live in the district. I don't know what district you live in, Unit 5, District 87.
87.
You live in 87, the argument can be made, oh, well, your property values will go up and your total assessed value will go up, and that'll look good if you ever wanted to sell your house, and it brings up your property value if you have good schools, right? If you don't have good school, it's good, kind of sucks for you, as far as selling your house. Nobody wants to live in the district with bad schools, which we will get to as well, because District 87, worse even than Unit 5 schools. But there's like an indirect benefit there, even if you don't have kids going to the district, right? If you don't have kids, it indirectly benefits you in some sort of way. If you use property tax, that's why property tax is the model here. It's because you live there, and the school could indirectly benefit you by bringing up your assessment. And then, of course, if you have school kids in the school district, then that's benefiting you because you're just sending your kids there. But this isn't like a consumer, like, they aren't the beneficiaries of that tax that they're paying. And it's kind of unfair. Property taxes are the best way. And, an aside, I think that property tax is just crazy that you have to pay on the property and you never actually own anything, right?
And you can get evicted if you don't pay your property taxes. So do you actually own the house, or who owns it? You're essentially paying rent to the government to stay in your own house, even if you haven't paid full and clear. So
exactly. And I have my own beef with property taxes in general, but that is like the best way if we were going to pay for schools, because the people who are paying those property taxes benefits from the district in some way or another. You could make the argument that they do. We don't, right, because of the way the district is operating. And let's start there, or actually let's go there with the district. And, we've talked about the tax burden here in the state of Illinois, how we're paying the highest taxes in the nation. Not to mention, this doesn't, go for food or anything like this. The sales tax, you're not charged in the grocery store per se, but in 2026, there is that local grocery tax that's going to be implemented. So, and then not to mention your sales tax, your local sales tax probably also going up in 2026 due to negotiations of eliminating that state grocery tax Governor J.B. Pritzker did just about a year ago. So we're going to have an even higher burden if this passes in 2026, because there's going to be a grocery tax. But on top of that tax burden, we're also looking at districts that aren't performing. Is that right, Dean?
Yeah. I think people would be shocked to find out some of these reading and math proficiencies, which is essentially a combination of state scores on different various standardized testing. They kind of aggregate them all together, and they spit out like how many of the students are proficient at essentially grade level reading or math. So they use the term ELA, which is like English language arts. But the blue on here, the graph, is the number of students that are proficient in Unit 5 at reading. So this is in 2019. That's where a lot of my data is coming from. I compared 2019 to 2024 data. So in 2019, Unit 5, 42% of the students were proficient, whatever that means, in reading. And 5 years later, it is only 41%, and actually slightly decreased, which is consistent with state trends as well. But that's how it is straight up. And then for District 87, their reading and language arts scores significantly lower. They only started at 26% in 2019, and they have dropped since then 4% to 22% overall for reading. Math is even worse, which isn't surprising considering this sales tax increase makes no mathematical sense for the taxpayers or the voters. So they can't teach math either. And they hope you can't read their legal verbiage on their websites and stuff, but I can, so I can call them out on that. But Unit 5, back in 2019, that's this blue line right here, only 39% of students could do math at proficient levels at the grade, and it dropped 10% in Unit 5, which is the good school in town, right, the good district, and it's only at 29% right now. District 87, my hometown district here, only 20% of students are proficient at math in 2019, and it got worse by 2024. It's only 13%. That's a 7% drop. Now, COVID obviously was a huge factor in all this in 2020 when they did all that e-learning from the middle of March, almost to the of March of 2020, almost all the way till the end of 21. I think is kind of when they came back in e-learning. But it's 3 or 4 years past then. Like the COVID impact has resided. The scores were a lot worse actually back during COVID. But now we're even seeing pre-COVID and now 4 years after COVID. The test scores just aren't there. If you actually want to pull that graph back up, I can also show you the tax changes. So Unit 5, the school districts directly, a combination of that tax increase that Unit 5 did, the actual tax rate change 2 years ago, like yes for Unit 5 or whatever it was, a combination of that plus the increase in the tax levies resulted in an overall property tax burden increase for the McLean County taxpayers in Unit 5 of 36%. And in District 87, they've increased property taxes by 28%. That's the actual amount you're paying out of your property tax bill, and that's from the tax levy. And I've heard some deceptive language where they're like, oh, well, it's the assessor who's increasing the assessed value of the house, and that's what the taxes are based off of. It's like, yes, but it's entirely up to the school districts whether or not they take none of that increased tax assessed value, a portion of it, all of it, or they could even go negative on that tax levy. So the school districts, the superintendents, so that's Dave Mauser and Kristen, I think it's Wilkie. I apologize, Kristen, if you hear. Weichel, sorry, if I mispronounced your last name there. They proposed to the school board, we want this percentage increase in the tax levy over last year. So when you're seeing that increase every year on your property tax bill, that's because the school district superintendents are proposing it, and your elected school boards are approving it and putting it into legal effect. So it's 100% the schools that have caused this 36% in Unit 5 and 28% increase in property taxes. And if you look over here at the enrollment change, since 2019, Unit 5 is down 6%. They have 6% less students today compared to 2019, and 87 is down 15%. I don't know, which is weird because the population's increasing in McLean County. One of the only counties that actually had a net increase for Illinois for the past few years. And the house values are going up, so everyone's buying all these houses, but parents are pulling their kids from the public schools, and I wonder why. Well, look at all their DEI stuff they're doing. I'm not surprised. And with these reading and math scores, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't send my kids to the public schools on purpose, so.
Yeah, well, and this is interesting. So since 2019, Unit 5, that tax burden or your property taxes have increased by 36%. Folks, you gotta if you take anything from today's show, you have to listen to that statistic. Since 2019, they've increased your taxes by 36%. And like Dean was saying, they can talk in circles all they want about, the tax assessor, values your home more. And we kept the tax rate flat, but no, they could actually, like Dean said, go negative on that and actually lighten the load.
They won't ever do that. So
no.
But this all just shows you that more money, this 36 and 28% increase in property taxes, does not equal better test scores. It actually equals worse test scores. There's a direct correlation. It's not causal, of course, but there's a negative correlation between the increased property taxes for the schools, increased tax revenue, increased spending, and lower tax scores, which is, lower test scores. So why they think this extra 1% new sales tax, a brand new way of collecting revenue from us outside of just property taxes, is going to magically fix everything? It won't. Like, they've proven from their own inefficient spending, mismanagement, bloated school admin, bloated costs, that kind of thing, above and beyond even inflation. They've proven that they can't handle our money. So why do we want to give them more tax revenue? Why do we want to reward with the new sales tax revenue? Why do we want to reward the districts when they haven't done anything to prove that they can spend our money wisely and actually do the meat and potatoes of school, which is teach your kids to do math and read? Like, if they can't do that, I don't know why they exist. So.
Exactly. Well, Dean, we are going to take a quick break, but we're going to come back and we're going to have this graphic up, and he's connected all of the dots. There's been multiple FOIAs that show that there is, I don't know how best to explain it other than I mean, conspiracy is what it feels like, or some sort of intergovernmental coordination between, your district administrators and your superintendents with Barry Riley's committee. It's a political action committee. Yes, for Unit 5 McLean County School, or yes for McLean County School. Sorry, yes for Unit 5 was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
They got a new one. Yes for McLean County Schools. And there's multiple emails back and forth, and we're going to unpack those emails. And I don't know if it's going to serve the sheriff in his investigation, some of these emails back and forth, but it feels like an intergovernmental coordination between people you're paying your tax dollars to. Okay, superintendents, a lot of tax dollars to, Dave Mauser, Kristen Weichel, working with a political action committee. I mean, you have to remember that this is like kind of working with the Trump campaign. What if they were working with the Trump campaign or the Kamala Harris campaign? They're working with political actors and campaigning. And are they doing that on your dime is the big question. So we're going to be right back in just a second. You're listening to Cities 92.9. Conservative Cat Cities 92.9, the news and talk Bloomington Normal. Today, in a very special episode, we are unpacking all things sales tax referendum. And before we took the break, we were going to be talking a little bit about this intergovernmental coordination, is like the best way I could describe it. Now, we do know that there is an investigation. Matt Lane told me that, hey, it's just the internet post that we were looking at first, but, it could be, potentially more, is kind of how he said it, but that's with the investigative, or with the detective. Okay, so their main issue here is the internet posts that were originally made by those school districts. Dean, tell me about those internet posts, and what kind of launched the investigation. What's the crux of the investigation here, what the sheriff's office is investigating?
Yeah, so the sheriff's stuff, that came back from something I discovered on February 7th, based off of it was a WGLT article from February 6th, where some of the rural school districts in McLean County, their superintendents were talking about this new website they had published. It's like April1cent.info, and it was a school-funded, so a taxpayer-funded website. They had a third party build it for them. They approved all the language and the verbiage and everything on there, and they sent that out and published it and put it out in the internet domain where any voter in the county could see it. And they did a newspaper article, and that's where I, a voter, saw it. And that I was curious, what is this website they have about the referendum? What are they talking about here? And in the April 1 cent info, right near the top, it says, we are asking voters to approve a sales tax. And that approve language was specifically in there. And that approve language, them asking voters or urging voters to vote yes or no, to approve or disapprove a ballot initiative, or to vote for a candidate or something like that, that's actually illegal language for the schools to use, taxpayer-funded schools. And there's a Illinois state statute. I'm trying to pull it up here as we speak.
Yeah, and then what's really important here, folks, is the reason why this kind of stuff is illegal, and I've seen it multiple places, and it's just starting to really take Illinois, I would say the entire state, by storm here, where in Champaign County you had, I don't know, close to $70,000 of taxpayer funds. They took it out of the budget, the Champaign County officials, they took it out of the budget and dedicated it to advertisements, like quite literally billboards, for a sales tax referendum that they were trying to pass last election cycle. As in 2024, the voters denied it, despite the 70,000 in advertising and mailers, billboards. This was a campaign that they had launched for a sales tax referendum in Champaign County. And essentially, there was an Illinois school or state board of elections complaint there in Champaign County, but they said it's out of our jurisdiction because it's criminal. So we have it pulled up here on YouTube. You guys can find it there. Dean, what are we looking at here?
These are screenshots I took on February 7th of this April.OneSet info website. Let me zoom in a little bit more here. This is the original verbiage. It said, school districts in McLean County are asking voters to approve a 1% county schools facility tax. So this is what prompted my email. I sent it to the Superintendent of Regional Office of Education, Mark Jontry. Sent it to WGLT, the Panagraph, Bloomington News, so it's Diane Benjamin's site. Erica Reynolds, the state's attorney. I sent the email to, who else? State Board of Elections and the State Board of Education. I said, hey, this approve right here, this is illegal language. This is not allowed per Illinois statute 10 ILCS 5/9-25.1, which I know is some numbers there. But Article 9, Section 25 defines the crime, a Class B misdemeanor, up to 6 months in jail, of the election interference statute. So it basically says that taxpayer resources and money cannot be used to urge voters or to ask voters to vote yes or to approve any ballot propositions. And folks, you got the smoking gun right there. They explicitly asked folks to approve it on a government-funded, taxpayer-funded school website that they created, and then they linked to it, all the local school districts. So Olympia, Ridgeview, Prairie Central, District 87, they all linked to this website from their homepages when it had the illegal language on it. My email, which did not include anything to the districts, Mark Jontry, who I think is in cahoots with all these superintendents, he tipped him off, and he's like, you got to change this website real quick. And so by the next day, it was changed to consider. And now this language is in all of their marketing material. We're asking voters to consider, which sure is technically legal from the letter of the law. So kudos on them for covering their tracks and covering up the Class B misdemeanor they committed. But still, they did it. I'm a voter. I know other voters who will testify as witnesses that they saw this illegal language. And the sheriff has issued subpoenas, and he's looking into when the website said what, when they changed it, any internal documents about how the language was developed, was it approved by attorneys, did the school districts approve it, who was aware of it, how explicit were they. He's trying to basically gather evidence of intent. Did they intend to ask voters to approve this, or is this just a typological error? Someone fat-fingered approve instead of consider, right? And that was basically what the state's attorney is going to need to prove that they intentionally violated this versus accidentally violated this state statute. But regardless, the state statute was violated, but whether or not you can prosecute and prove criminal intent, that would depend on what they can find with these subpoenas that the sheriff has issued.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's so far that's what the investigation is all about. Now we have another slide for you. If you guys want to go to YouTube, you guys can see it. Email correspondence back and forth, and it's getting kind of odd. Once Dean had foiled all of this, shared it with me, I looked it over. The main thing that I'm seeing here is that there is kind of like an intergovernmental coordination between Barry Riley's PAC. So this is the Yes for McLean County Schools. The treasurer of that PAC is Patrick Manieri, and he's running for Unit 5 school board. And, you can go to IllinoisSunshine.org. I think they actually just got from Unit 5 Teachers Union, what was it, $7,500 or something like that, an installment in that campaign account. But what's really concerning, and the crux of all of these emails, I think that we can chalk it up to, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Dean, they are feeding information and campaign material, or they're feeding information for this campaign to use while out there campaigning, and they're working with a PAC to pass this. Okay, so it'd be similar to, I don't know, let's say Dan Brady. Okay, he's running for Bloomington mayor. It'd be similar to the Dan Brady, Friends for Dan Brady, emailing back and forth with District 87, trying to get District 87 information to help him win the Bloomington mayoral race. Okay, so if he was running specifically on we'll talk about this, school resource officers, and how there's not enough school resource officers in District 87, right? And I'm being hypothetical here. If there's not enough school resource officers in District 87, Dan Brady, promise to secure, funding or whatever, or to make sure this district in my area in Bloomington has enough school resource officers. We're going to work with the Bloomington Police Department, and he's using that. And I'm just trying to help people understand, because I think we get lost when we talk about PACs, right? A PAC is the same thing as a candidate, and you should keep that in mind, folks. So we've got the emails here. Dean, I'll let you talk about this and what you found in their email chains. And what do you think it says?
So I want to kind of upfront use an analogy to kind of describe this. People often have a very friendly and positive views towards their local government schools. But imagine if all these emails going on here that I'm about to show, the email chains and the flow of information, was for a sales tax that would benefit the public security, the public safety, so the police departments, right? So imagine if there was a political action committee trying to pass a sales tax to help the police departments get more money for whatever purposes, and they were emailing the police chief of Normal or Bloomington, either one, whatever. Imagine if this was going on and this coordination was going on between a political committee and the police department, right? I don't think people would be as friendly, especially some of our McLean County residents who are on the left side of the spectrum. I don't think they'd be too friendly towards seeing the police department engaging in the state crime of election interference or violating the State Officials and Employee Ethics Acts, which prohibits state officials and state employees, and thus local government employees as well, from using state time, facilities, or equipment to campaign for or against any questions submitted to voters. So there's two statutes, I think, now that are in play with this email coordination. So enough on kind of that background. So this first email chain, I got my FOIA request, and this FOIA request was all prompted by a WGLT article from March 5th with Barry Riley, this guy down here, the former District 87 superintendent. I think he left in 22 or 23, and he got replaced by David Mauser. But he talked about how in that article he was starting this political committee, and he could actually go out and explicitly ask the voters to approve it or say yes to the sales tax, where the schools weren't allowed to. So even he acknowledges the schools can't say, we're asking you to approve this. He acknowledges it in that article, but they still did it anyways. So that prompted this FOIA request I sent to District 87 and to Unit 5, and I have a pending one I haven't got back yet from the Regional Office of Education number 17, which overviews like McLean County and Livingston County and a couple other counties, the overall school districts in those areas. So this first email chain is from January 6th, which is a hilarious name considering the crime of election interference was first committed, I think, by the schools and the government schools on January 6th, which is an infamous day for a lot of people. But unprompted email from Erica Hunt. She is an employee with the Regional Office of Education. So her boss is Mark John Tree. He's the superintendent of regional education, which I mentioned before. She sends an email to both Kristen Wickel. Sorry, Kristen, I'm just destroying your name. Weichel. I'll get it one day. Maybe
That's all right.
And she sent this email to Weichel and David Mauser, the superintendents of 87 and Unit 5, and she was giving them media strategy, some talking points. She even proposed the idea that the school boards pass a resolution promising tax relief, which they ended up doing in February. On the February 19th, I think, is when the school districts promised to, in my view, bribe the taxpayers. Let us raise your taxes and we'll give you a small portion back for a couple of years. She suggested that, and that's the first record I have of anyone suggesting that.
She's not an elected official. She is, right, she's
a state employee, I believe, with the Regional Office of Education.
Okay.
She did send this from her personal email, so take that for its worth. But she is giving this information to the government email addresses of Mauser and Wickel. In reply to that, David Mauser says her information was unbelievably helpful, and she asks Ms. Hunt if she would like to be contacted by a committee that's working on this, working on passing the sales tax. And on January 6th at 7:54, she replied, yes, I'd love to be contacted by them and help out behind the scenes however I can. So David Mauser, 11 minutes later, after she said, yes, I want to be contacted by this committee, he immediately forwards her email and her information to Barry Riley, who's with the Yes for Schools, McLean County Schools Political Committee. So it's very obvious to me that when David Mauser is like, we have a committee working on this, the committee that's working on it is Barry Riley's committee. Okay. Now, technically, Barry Riley filed his paperwork to establish the committee on February 23rd of this year. But that just is what they have to do in order to accept money. They could have been operating as a committee independently before they officially registered. And I think this is evidence that Barry Riley was operating with the committee, with government officials, to try to get this sales tax passed, to try to work on media strategy, talking points, ideas for the school boards to pass resolutions. I think this is pretty strong evidence that the committee that David Mauser is talking about is Barry Riley and his Yes for McLean County Schools committee to pass the sales tax.
Mm-hmm. Folks, we have to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. We're going to come back. Illegal coordination, more email chains here next between intergovernmental. So we've got the Regional Office of Education, District 17, David Mauser, the Superintendent of District 87, Kristen Weichel, the Superintendent of Unit 5. We've got so much more ahead. You won't want to miss any of it. We're talking about the sales tax referendum this morning. We'll be right back. Conservative Cat Cities 92.9, the news and talk Bluey to normal. All things sales tax referendum, which will appear on your ballot April 1st. Get out and vote, folks. This should be the issue that gets you out to vote. You should walk over glass. You should be walking over glass to go vote no for this. We've got Dean Fletcher on, and he has done a deep dive, folks, and we've got graphics for you on YouTube. If you'd like to take a look at those, it kind of helps you see what this intergovernmental coordination kind of looks like. So we're going to talk about some more correspondence that happened January 27th through the 29th of 2025. So Dean, what are we looking at here?
So this is an email that District 87 Superintendent David Mauser sent to Barry Riley, the former District 87 Superintendent, and the chairman of the Yes for McLean County Schools political committee to pass the sales tax. This is at the end of January, and it had a title of Website for Informational Campaign. So Mauser sends this email to Barry Riley. It includes the april1cent.info information site. And at that time, when he sent it on the 27th, it had that illegal election interference language on it of McLean County Schools are asking voters to approve, can't urge a voter to vote yes or no on the ballot initiative. He sends that to Barry Riley and says, we'll be sending this out next week when they kick things off. Kicking things off is essentially their media coverage. There was a WGLT article next week in reference to that time frame. He's talking about all the school district, local McLean County School District websites linked to this April 1 cent info website that had the illegal approved language on it. So he sends this to Barry Riley, and we already established that Mauser considers Barry Riley to be this committee that he referred and sent some strategy information on how to get this passed in the last email we went over. So Barry Riley is the committee at this point. Riley replies back, looks great. So he looked over this April 1 cent website, and right at the top it says, we're asking voters to approve. So I presume Barry Riley read the text on the website and said, it looks great. He gave his thumbs up. I like that approve language. That's what he's implying, I think, when he says he looks great. It looks great. Mm-hmm. And then he says he'll be back next week. So this is the first week of February he's talking about, and I'll be available, and I think he'll be available when Mauser said we will kick things off. So for the media blitz, get that information out there, begin the public advocacy, political advocacy to get this sales tax passed. So I think this is further evidence that Riley, he had advanced knowledge as part of this political committee that was working on behalf of the schools to kind of be their political advocacy arm. He had advanced knowledge of the website, of the illegal approved language, and he said he'd be available to help coordinate and work with the kicking things off, whatever that means in actuality. So.
Mm-hmm. So far, the emails that we've looked over, Erica Hunt, she kind of got the ball rolling here. And she emailed basically talking points, media strategy to get this past the sales referendum. And she emailed that to David Mauser and Kristen Weichel, the superintendents of these two districts, okay? And then from there, they said, oh, Erica Hunt, and I'm paraphrasing, Erica Hunt, we have a committee that you should know about, and here is the committee, and the committee is Barry Riley with the Yes for McLean County Schools.
Yep.
So what's the problem there, Dean, with that first email, if you could summarize it? Basically, the problem with that, why should our listeners see this as a problem?
Well, I think the biggest issue here is that David Mauser, he's an appointed public official of the government entity known as District 87 Schools. He's using his school email, taxpayer-funded email, to send information to a political committee, to refer people who have good campaign strategy and planning ideas and political advocacy ideas to a political committee of someone he knows well, his former boss, actually, I don't think Mauser worked for Riley, but the guy who he replaced. I'm sure he's in lots of close contact with for advice on the district and whatnot. But he's using his employee. This is Monday morning. This is the Monday after winter break, January 6th. First thing Mauser is doing is sending emails, connecting people, coordinating with Barry Riley's political campaign while he's on government time, using government facilities. He's probably in his office, using government emails to coordinate and share strategy information with a political committee, trying to pass a sales tax that will benefit the schools. So he's doing this way up front, right after Christmas break ends. And then even later, he's sharing information with the website, getting feedback, trying to coordinate. We'll be available. Let's help kick things off. So this is further evidence that they are coordinating, working behind the scenes. Whether it's in-person meetings, phone calls, using personal emails, whatever it is, that they're coordinating. This is just the publicly available FOIA information I could get, that Mauser and the government school district is using taxpayer-funded time, taxpayer-funded emails to coordinate with Barry Riley and his Yes for McLean County Schools campaign, which is illegal. Yeah. It violates 2 state laws. So.
Yeah, well, and here's the big thing, folks, is that obviously the schools they can. So is there like an exception or an acceptable level of trying to get this passed, with these in their own personal capacity? I mean, I guess they could work with the PAC, right? And they could work with Barry Riley. But the problem is once you start to use, your government emails, once you start to use the district websites, the district social media, I think every morning I wake up, and I know our listeners do too, to Unit 5 publishing a Facebook post about how great the sales tax referendum is. And that's just not cool, because I'd imagine if there was a PAC against the sales tax referendum, this wouldn't be going on. They wouldn't be working with the PAC that is against the sales tax referendum. They specifically are using government time and their emails to try to get this passed because they have everything gained from it, right?
Yep. And I think it's the sharing of information that's really the worst part of it, using the government emails, right? If Mauser is using davemauser@gmail.com, there's no story. Who cares, right? But he's using his school email. Employees are doing this on school time, and I have the next page. The next email we'll go over that shows that employees of Mauser are actually helping coordinate and share information and strategy with the political committee, with Barry Riley's political committee.
All right, well, we're going to get to that next email here next on Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. Good morning, Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. We're talking all things sales tax referendum. It's going to be on your ballot April 1st, folks. You better be walking over broken glass to vote no. Vote no. I don't want to see any of my neighbors suffer any more than they already do. Here in the state of Illinois, we went over this. We have the highest tax burden here in the nation. Okay, so I don't want to see any of my neighbors have to pay more to failing schools. And talking about failing schools, before we took the break, we were telling a little bit about a couple of email chains. So already we've established that people are using their government emails, emailing back and forth about this PAC and getting people in touch with this PAC that's spearheaded by Barry Riley, the former District 87 superintendent. Now there's a treasurer of that PAC, and his name is Patrick Maneri, and he's running for Unit 5 school board uncontested. Tell me about this email chain that we're looking at here, Dean. If you guys want to go to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, you guys can follow along with us. We've got nice little flow charts that Dean has made up, and they're good.
Yeah, so this is from February 20th with the email subject line of 1 cent tax seeking information. So as you explained, Patrick Manieri, he is the treasurer of the Yes for McLean County Schools Political Action Committee, which I've already established Barry Riley has been operating and working at in coordination with the school districts as early as January 6th, if not earlier. He's also that Unit 5 board candidate. So he's not only a political action committee treasurer, he's also a politician running for office himself. So on the 20th, Patrick sends a rather long email to every single government school district superintendent in McLean County. He sends it to Kristen Weichel, Dave Mauser, El Paso, Hayworth, Tri-Valley, Leroy, Prairie Central, Olympia, Ridgeview, and Lexington School District, the superintendents. He also sent it to Mark Jontry, who a name that keeps on popping up that I think we should take a closer look at. I'm waiting for a FOIA request back from any coordination he might have had with Barry Riley in his committee. But he is the Regional Office of Education number 17 superintendent. So he's like the superintendent of superintendents, so to speak. And then Patrick also CCs on this email his partner in crime, Barry Riley. He's the head of the political committee to get the sales tax passed. And very curiously, Patrick CC's Ben Matthews. Well, who's Ben Matthews, you might say? Well, he is with the Illinois Educators Association.
The guy funding it.
He is, Illinois Education Association is the largest teachers union in the state. Ben Matthews is essentially their teacher union political lobbyist. That's his whole job. And I was surprised to see Ben Matthews on that email, but it makes more sense later in a separate email chain we'll go over. But anyways, so Patrick sent this long email with a list of questions to all the school district superintendents. He essentially says that the political advocacy work that they are all working on together, that work needs to be, and this is quote, centralized, fortified, and championed, presumably by the Political Action Committee. So Patrick's going, hey, all the work you school districts have done, you've done great. The April 1 cent info, April1cent.info website, it's great. He liked it better when it had the legal approved language on it, I'm sure, but that got cleaned up to cover up their crimes. But he said that your work needs to be centralized, fortified, and championed. Well, by whom is the natural question you would ask? And by whom is Patrick and Barry's Political Action Committee? They want to be the political operations arm for the schools. And so he's trying to get some information. In fact, he says it's time to set in motion a strategic plan. And he asked them to answer the questions he gives them. He gave them like 14 or so questions. So we, who's we? I don't know if it's just the committee, if it's all of them, the school district and the committee in combination, we can begin focusing our collective efforts for all school districts. And then he has this nice little line where he's like, if you're not comfortable emailing it, because we know this can be FOIA'd, give me a call. Essentially, he's asking them to avoid FOIA requests and give him this information privately to avoid the watchful eyes of certain people like myself.
Yeah, yeah, I find that interesting. Then, a flavor of, the questions that were in this email, Patrick Manieri, he, is asking, do you have adequate SROs, school resource officers? What are you spending when it comes to SEL, social emotional learning? Those are the types of questions that were asked in this email. And, one of those things, the answer for at least District 87, I'll go through District 87, they said, yes, we have adequate SROs. Okay, so school resource officers. So if they try District 87 to come at you and say, we need the sales tax referendum to put more police officers in the school, that's bogus, because they, even themselves via this email, have said that they have adequate SROs and they don't need it anymore. Okay, so if they say that, then that's bogus. But that's what the whole point of the email is, isn't it, Dean? Is to try to figure out where they can start campaigning based on the school's profile, I guess. If they have inadequate SROs, maybe we can use that as a campaign talking point and get people to vote yes because, say Unit 5 needs more school resource officers. And this was interesting. I can't believe this. SEL, by the way, social emotional learning, folks, that's DEI. It's just 2.0. And it's cuter, I guess, is the best way I could, because we caught on to the DEI stuff. They used a new acronym, it's SEL. But it's $1.7 million that they're spending on SEL at District 87, and some of these questions that Patrick Manieri posed to District 87 was, what's the cost of SEL at your district? Social workers, psychologists, counselors, programs, kids are more messed up than ever. So these psychologist counselors aren't doing much good, I don't think. But it's all DEI and like more of this modern learning environment. And that's the way they phrase it on their website here, the April.1 info. They say that this money is going to be used for creating safer. So that's your school resource officers, which they prove that they don't need at District 87. Modern learning environments, which is probably the SEL stuff. And if they're already spending $1.7 million on SEL, do they really need more? That's my question. I don't think that they really need the 1% of it. Judging by a lot of these answers, I don't think that they really need much else.
Yeah, and remember that they've already increased property taxes in Unit 5 by 36% and in District 87 28% since 2019. So they already have a boatload more money, but they want more money will fix all our problems. More money, more problems, actually. Their test scores have gone down since they've gotten that more money. So
I jumped ahead a little bit, but okay. So this email chain, Patrick Manieri, he sent out a mass email, CC'd Barry Riley, Ben Matthews on there. Ben Matthews is the IEA. He's the guy funding the PAC. Okay, $7,500 is the latest installment I saw on IllinoisSunshine.org to this PAC, for McLean County Schools. But he sent it to all these district superintendents, correct? Patrick Manieri.
Yep.
And they're questions that are asking the district for intel, so that way they can better craft a campaign message. Yeah. So this is coordinating with PAC. And why should our audience take issue with this, Dean?
Well, because Patrick they all know he's on this committee. David Mauser has known he's on this committee since January, at least January, and that everyone in Unit 5 and probably a lot of these other people in the email know Patrick's running for the Unit 5 school board. So he's a political candidate, and Barry does some very strong language, or Patrick does some very strong language. Like, we have to centralize and fortify our efforts, our combined effort to get this passed. We need to have a strategic plan. Well, if you're making a strategic plan with the school districts, that seems like the definition of coordination to me. So he's even saying it. He's saying the quiet parts out loud, that he is looking to engage in taxpayer-funded coordination strategy with the school districts to get this thing passed. He's pretty straightforward about it, I think, in this email, and some of the other responses he gets kind of highlight that the schools are all more than willing to voluntarily give this information up. A bunch of them gave up the information without even needing a FOIA request, which they wouldn't give this to me if I asked it for them without a FOIA request.
So what's this next email all about?
So this next email, this is the day after, and then a week after that initial email from Mr. Manieri. I didn't see, so this is Michael Cornell. He's basically second in command at District 87. He's their chief financial officer. He's also their Freedom of Information Act FOIA officer. My assumption is that Mauser, who's out of office when he got this email on the 20th, that he auto sends emails to Michael Cornell, because I couldn't see how it got to Cornell. But Cornell had it, and the next day he's sending this financial data, this detailed information without prompting, back to Patrick, which implies some level of familiarity. Maybe they've already coordinated before off government email servers, but he sends some of that information back. And then, very curiously, on the 27th, he answers some more of the questions Mr. Cornell with District 87 does. And one of the questions Patrick Manieri asked for was, can you connect us with your parent-teacher organizations? They want to try to use the PTO as a political arm of the political arm, I guess. And so Cornell sent some mental health training information, social workers, that the number is there, to Patrick, but also includes a document that's titled PTO Officers to Patrick here. And what's curious about that is when I did my FOIA request, which is how I got this whole email chain in the first place, Michael Cornell actually included a number of the documents he sent to Patrick, some of the financial data and that kind of stuff. But he issued an official partial redaction that's allowed under FOIA law for the state of Illinois. In his response to me, he claimed that he was partially redacting some of the information using this statute, which is essentially a statute protecting private personal information. So I don't have any evidence of this because I haven't gotten this document yet, but I suspect that there was parents and teachers' personal emails, personal phone numbers, their names on this document that Michael Cornell willingly and freely sent to a political committee and a political candidate. So he shared private privilege information without the consent of the people on this PTO list to Patrick. And then he basically admits that there was private personal information on it when he withheld it from me. So that's highly skeptical and suspicious. Like, he wouldn't send it to me. Well, I'm the bad guy. I'm doing FOIA requests. But he'd send it to his, I'm assuming his good buddy, his good pal, Patrick, whether or not they've met before. But he knows who Patrick is. He knows who's with the committee. And he freely gives him this private information without the people's consent on it. So that's a whole other issue that Mr. Cornell might have to worry about during some ethics reviews that hopefully come out of this.
Yeah, well, and here's the big part of that is this PTO. Why does the PAC, because did the PAC explicitly ask for PTO contact information?
It did. I don't have the question off the top of my head here. I have it in the email chain, I think.
That's okay. Because where I'm going with this is, if this PAC is wanting contact information, and essentially they want people to work for the PAC. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what the PTO contact information would be all about. It'd be, trying to get, parents of the district to work on behalf of the PAC and get the sales tax referendum passed. Because what else would he want the contact information for? He's the treasurer of a PAC that's trying to pass the sales tax. I highly doubt he's wanting to send them like Christmas cards, right? He's probably wanting the contact information so that way he can say, hey, we need your help in passing this. Can you knock on doors? Can you hang some door hangers? And kind of getting some workers for the PAC. So what's this?
This is the email. This is the questions that he asked. So he explicitly asked here at question number 10, please share the names and contact information for leadership of your booster association, PTAOC, and any other community advocates. And Cornell gives it to him. So if you're on the PTO organization for Bloomington District 87, a district employee gave your private personal information to a political committee, to a political candidate without your written consent, which is illegal and unethical. But he did it anyways because he knows his boss is coordinating with Barry Riley and Barry Riley's political committee. So.
Okay. All right. Well, so we've got this email chain that we were at. And we've got another one. And folks, you can always come to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble that we're going to cover here on the other side. I got to take a quick break with Dean Fletcher. We're covering the sales tax referendum and this coordination that's been going on between district officials and members of this PAC, Patrick Maneri and District 87 former Superintendent Barry Riley. Yes, for McLean County Schools. So we've been going through the coordination here, and it's very interesting and if not damning. And I hope, like you said, things come out of this where, there's at least ethics investigations. You can't be using taxpayer time to, try to get this political action committee to get them to pass this for you. That's essentially what's going, like you described them. The PAC is a political arm. Because the schools know that they can't do it. But coordinating with this political arm is still bad. Okay. Although you're not out there, it's still illegal. So we're going to be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Good morning. Hey, you're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. We're talking all things sales referendum. Number one, so cool that Dean had done all of this homework and is bringing it to you on Cities 92.9. He's been working really hard, created all these graphics to show you the coordination, illegal coordination. I think it'd be interesting if the sheriff investigates some of these emails, the coordination that's going on here. I know that the investigation primarily we talked about early in the show is stemming from those posts, the internet posts where they were asking voters to approve the referendum on their district sites. And those are taxpayer infrastructure sites, okay, that we pay for. And they were asking voters to approve. Now, we've been going through several email chains now. District 87 replies back. I told you $1.7 million, Michael Cornell says, is what they spent on social emotional learning. They also have adequate SROs, school resource officers. Now, Weichel responded back as well. So we had Michael Cornell's response, but we also have Christian Weichel's response. What did we see there, Dean?
Yeah, so I think this is like the fourth school that freely gave this information to Patrick and his political committee. knowing that he's a unified board candidate, so he's a political candidate as well.
And by freely, what do you mean by that?
So he did not request a FOIA request for this, which then they would be legally obligated to give out information, public records to Mr. Manieri. He just asked, pretty please, I promise we'll strategize and coordinate and centralize the efforts to get this passed because I'm a political committee. That's essentially what he asked. And this is kind of a summary of what he asked in that initial email. So this is Dr. Weichel responding back to him once again without a FOIA request. She did this of her own free will because she knows Patrick is an ally to getting this passed. So she's sending him what I think was some of the information was just generic funding levels, but I thought there were some interesting details that she shared about which schools in Unit 5 have school resource officers and which ones don't. Personally, if I was a superintendent, I wouldn't go around telling which of my schools are unprotected from mass shooters. That's crazy. I would not say that. But she decided it was worth doing and sharing that information with the political committee and with a unified board candidate. And Patrick here is running unopposed, Patrick Manieri, for unified board. Dr. Weichel knows this, so she knows in a few months Patrick's going to be her boss. So I don't know if she's trying to like curry favor from her new boss because, you know, he gets to approve her pay raises and make sure she's gainfully employed with a fat salary, I'm sure. So she sends them this information, detailed security information about the schools, so Patrick can use it to advocate on her behalf, explicitly asking voters to vote yes on the sales tax referendum. So this was just, to me, is a little not very kosher to be sharing the information and then potentially with your guaranteed to be future boss as well, since Patrick's going to be on the school board.
Well, and it raises all kind of questions. So and like you said, elementary schools are currently unprotected, right?
Yeah, as far as Dr. Weichel said that there are no school resource officers there that are like permanently assigned. She says there are some that are assigned, like, and they might stop by, you know, randomly throughout the day or something, but they're primarily at the high school and the junior highs. I think there's 6 total in Unit 5. So
now here's what Patrick will likely do with that information. He's going to go out and he's going to campaign with this Yes for McLean County PAC, create all kinds of mailers and say, hey, you know, they're inadequate. Like, we need way more school resource officers to protect our young kids at the elementary schools. And he's going to create all kinds of mailers for that. Now, here's the thing that's pretty damning to me is you're spending, I think with Unit 5, it was 1.5 million on SEL learning. Yep. So this is modern learning environments, DEI, whatever. I'm sure they're spending millions on DEI as well. Not to mention a hefty salary for their District 87 or their Unit 5 DEI. I forget her name, but salary for that individual to carry out trainings for teachers. It's kind of interesting that they aren't adequately staffing or adequately providing SROs at this elementary school, especially considering the statistic. Elementary schools are typically targeted for mass shootings over junior highs or high schools. Yep. So they're not even really using the data and the statistics to their favor or to their advantage, where they're going to put these SROs in the elementary schools to protect the young kids.
Basically, I mean, so they spend the 1.5 million on that SEL garbage, psychologists and social workers, but they're only spending a few $100,000 on the physical safety of your kids by having cops in the buildings. They're like, no, we'll keep them mentally safe, and they'll wish positive thoughts to the shooters who break into the school because there's no cops there to protect the students, right? Like they're putting their money where their mouth is. Their priority is the mental health of the students, which, I mean, let's be honest, their mental health is pretty bad right now.
It's probably because of the SEL.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not helping because they've been spending these millions of dollars every year and their mental health is not getting any better. But then they're intentionally not putting money towards these school resource officers. And then they're like, but if you give us more money, we promise, pretty please, we'll keep your kids safe then. Physically safe.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is, I think that the point here is no matter how much money they get, they're going to mismanage it. I mean, millions compared to a few 100,000. You're investing in the mental stability of students by the tune of millions, and then not the counterpart here, the physical safety of the students. There's, they say equity. That's very there's a big disparity there, where you're investing millions compared to hundreds of thousands of
And
dollars.
honestly, like, sorry to interrupt, but like, Unit 5, 60% of the kids aren't proficient in reading, right? If you couldn't read as a kid, you'd probably feel pretty bad about your self-esteem, right? You probably have low mental health because you can't read, because the schools are failing you. So how much of their low mental health is due to their low reading scores, right? And they're putting money towards all this other stuff. But less than 50% of the total district expenditures for Unit 5 and 87, it's about 46%, actually goes to classroom instruction. The other 50% goes to buildings, custodians, technology, insurance, buses, and I'm sure highly paid school administrators as well. So it just shows you where their priorities are. They can't even get over the hump of spending 50% on the classroom, which is why these kids can't read or do math. So.
And Barry Riley's pension, the $200,000+, which is insane to me,
Yeah.
especially considering when you look at other area districts in Peoria. The superintendent there currently makes $99,000 or something like that. They're salaried there, and they're managing 25 schools. Okay, Barry Riley managed about 9, and he's collecting a pension no longer even in that district. He's collecting a pension to the tune of $200,000. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense in the world. So,
and he has another job now. He's working somewhere else in a nonprofit, making $75K a year. So he's pulling in $300,000, and he's only in his 50s, I think. He'll get that. I read an article. He works out every day at 5 a.m., so he'll probably live till he's 100. So $200,000 every year to Barry Riley until he dies in his hundreds, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be so upset about it. I don't want to sound like butthurt, but it's like it's not fair because the kids aren't doing well. So you're not even really doing your job of educating the kids because they're worse than Unit 5.
And the median income in McLean County is only like $60,000 per household. So he's making more than triple. In his retirement, he's making more than triple than what the average family that he's educating, or I should say not educating, because their kids can't read or do math.
Yeah. Well, and that just tells you about the tax burden here in McLean County. And I'm not too sure the sales tax, we pay a higher sales tax than most of Illinois municipalities, if I'm not mistaken. Like most neighborhoods don't pay near what we pay in McLean County.
Yeah, it's 82% higher. We pay higher sales tax right now at the 8.75% rate than 82% of other Illinois municipalities. And if this 1% gets added on and we're almost at 10%, we'll be in the 90th percentile. So basically only Chicago and a few like suburbs would have higher sales tax than us. And we're already taxed out the wazoo with income tax and property taxes. And they just want to make it more expensive for working families, which is why you should go out and vote no, because we shouldn't reward the schools with more money when they are getting worse at educating our children. So.
Do you have any more emails by chance, Dean?
Yeah, this one is kind of fun. This one came to me by accident, I think, in my FOIA request. So Ben Matthews, we talked about him. He is the head of the Illinois Educators Association. He's also works with the Unit 5 union as well. He's their chief lobbyist. He sends an email to Patrick and Barry, or at least he tries to send it to Patrick, telling him about the Building and Trades Council. And he's like, this might be a good group for the two of you to get in front of for potential fundraising. Now, the reason I have this email is because Ben accidentally sent it to a Patrick at District 87 instead of Patrick Maneri, and he replies back in later email, oops, wrong Patrick. So this email came to me by accident. This is supposed to be a completely private email, but they went and met with some different unions, and a few days later, on March 10th, the normal teachers union, so the normal teachers, their union dues go to their union. Ben Matthews works with them, and they funneled $7,500 to this Yes for Schools committee. So the Yes for McLean County Schools committee can legally coordinate with the school districts. That directly benefits teachers, right? They have more money they can spend out of their normal budget. They can use the sales tax revenue to spend it. Instead, they have more money for the teachers. So there's an incentive for the teachers there to raise your taxes. And then the builders union, which this is what this email chain's about, they ended up giving $2,500 to the committee. And the sales tax revenue can only go towards a few things, and one of it includes the buildings. So it's not surprising that the builders union would want to give money to pass something that they would benefit from as well. So this is a little side image. You can kind of see how the unions and the lobbyists work together with these committees. And in conjunction, these committees are working with the school districts, legally, of course, to get this passed. So a good infographic for our viewers.
Tell me about the benefits that, obviously the unions are going to be getting here if this passes.
Yeah, so the $2,500 from the Builders Union, they get the sales tax passed. There's going to be tens of millions of dollars annually every year coming into these schools that they are required by state law to either spend on building upgrades, on security, or on mental health. And a large portion of it's going to go towards the buildings, new roofs, HVAC systems, new security doors, metal detectors, that sort of thing, to make the public schools, which a lot of the public school buildings already look like prisons, they're going to become more like prisons even more. More cops roaming the halls, more metal detectors, that sort of thing, bulletproof glass, I'm sure, which kid safety, all right, if you want to say that's worth it. But the schools already look like prisons, ugly prisons at that. So they're trying to sweeten the pot here to get this passed. So if you got one of those super annoying Yes for Schools mailer last week, I got that mailer from Barry Riley's campaign the same day I got a mailer from Unit 5. Because Unit 5's pumping out a bunch of taxpayer money to generate these informational mailings. And the same day we get this vote yes thing from Barry Riley's committee. That's courtesy of, that spam mail is courtesy of the teachers union and the builders union in town.
And here's the thing too, is, they're trying to secure their positions at the IEA, Ben Matthews, by getting the sales tax referendum. What I want listeners to understand is, yeah, it's going to HVAC and, making I like how you said the schools look more like prisons. I remember actually at the time there was a big story with District 87, Barry Riley. He does not like me very much. The use of profanities was present between conversations between he and I. And he didn't like me very much. But there was this recording, and they were talking about this kid who had brought in some weed and a gun and things like that. And they all sat down, the teachers, and they were chuckling and laughing. And there was this recording that was sent to me by a District 87 employee. And she, recorded with her cell phone, and everybody was chuckling about this gun being found with the weed. And at the time, I think I asked District 87, Barry Riley, superintendent, what do you think about metal detectors? And he, was really upset by that I had asked that question. And he, was offended that I'd asked some sort of question. But here they are, 2-3 years later. I mean, that was like, I don't know, 4 years ago, something like that. They're talking about metal detectors and more safety for the students, where it's like, why not pay for some metal detectors back then? When they scoff at you, when you said that. But the kids, they're not doing well mentally, like we've already talked about this morning. And the kids are bringing in guns and things like that. So it is kind of like a prison. But anyway, so the IEA, they're trying to secure their positions, and this is all freeing up. So once you have this revenue coming in from the sales tax, that frees up money elsewhere. So they can pay themselves the salaries that they want, and the teachers. And if the teachers are getting a higher salary, that benefits them because they get higher dues, and everybody's just making all kinds of money except you.
Yep. You're paying for all of it, taxpayers. So another reason to vote no.
Yep. We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to come right back, and we're going to wrap up the show. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. We had a very special episode this morning about the sales tax referendum. I like to call it the sales tax that's going to throw you into more tax burden, and it's not going to benefit you in any type of way. And they'll call it the 1 cent tax. It's the 1% tax. And Dean Fletcher has been on with me. He's done so much research on this, so I can't begin to thank Dean for coming on to the show and sharing with you all of this information, all the time that he's put in, emails and the coordinating between these district superintendents and this PAC. Now, there is an investigation. McLean County Sheriff's Office has an investigation launched, and that kind of stems, the crux of it is the internet post where they, had the April 1 cent info language asking voters to approve the referendum, and they featured that on their district websites. But you tried to take it multiple other places, and you kind of had to do like, I don't want to say venue shopping, but I mean, nobody wanted to take this alleged claim of election interference, right?
Yep. Yeah. It was a good learning experience for me, kind of figuring out like what organizations and what government entities and agencies and law enforcement agencies like care about the law. Because from the beginning, I was quoting that Article 9, Section 25 of the Election Code, which defines the election crime of election interference, which is using taxpayer funds and resources to urge voters to vote yes or approve a ballot proposition. Which is a Class B misdemeanor, 6 months in jail, $1,500 fine. So it's not a slap on the hand. Like, there's jail time here. Yeah, I kind of had to find someone who's willing to even look into this. Not even like prosecute. That's not. I mean, they just need to investigate this, because I had pretty strong evidence, from the screenshots of that April 1 cent.info website back on February 7th, that it did contain explicit verbiage asking voters to approve the sales tax, which is an illegal verbiage on a taxpayer-funded website. Yeah, so I sent it to Erica Reynolds, the McLean County State's attorney. She initially told me her office was prohibited by legal precedent from accepting like independent investigation requests from citizens, and that her office also lacks the budget, and McLean County hasn't allocated a budget for her to have an independent investigator in some years. So she basically was prohibited by law and had no money to investigate this. So she referred me to the state police and the attorney general's office and the state board of elections. So there's a portal on the Illinois State Police website on their Special Investigations Unit website, and they specifically say they investigate crimes and ethics complaints against elected officials, publicly appointed officials, when they violate criminal law. So I submitted a request to them. They shot back an email saying, because these are school districts and the superintendent is not elected, he's a publicly appointed official or something, they can't look into this. And they also try to say that this election interference crime isn't a crime. Their response made no sense, and they didn't reply to my follow-up. So that was a dead end with the state police, the Special Investigations Unit. I reached out to the state of Illinois, the Attorney General's office. They have a Public Integrity Bureau. They specifically investigate ethics complaints and illegal activity by elected officials and publicly appointed officials and government entities. They're infamous for not investigating Mike Madigan, the now felon and jailed former Speaker of the House of Illinois. That was a federal investigation because the state's attorney would just turn a blind eye to it. So I thought that was going to be a long shot, reaching out to someone in Attorney General Kwame's office, and that proved to be the case. They basically said even though the verbiage was on the website and it was very explicit there, they said they thought it was an accident that they asked voters to approve. They didn't do it intentionally, even though they did no investigation, had no evidence to support intent at all whatsoever. So that was kind of disappointing. They basically just, told me to shove it, and that they weren't going to do anything about it. The State Board of Elections, I had to submit a formal letter to them, notarized letter about the complaint, and they said, well, that law you mentioned, Mr. Fletcher, that's a criminal statute, and only the Attorney General or the state's attorney can handle it, which they've already both rebuffed me. So I went back to Erica Reynolds, the state attorney for McLean County, because she had left this like slight door that she's like, if no one else will look into it, we might try to see if we can look into it. And I'm like, hey, no one will look into it. If you want to look into it? Now? How about now? And she actually called me on the phone like 20 minutes after I sent that email. So kudos to her on a Friday afternoon for being in the office, for one, and give me a quick prompt call. That was at least some nice public service to me. I felt appreciative of that. But she suggested that I could reach out to the sheriff, McLean County Sheriff, or like Bloomington Police. I don't know, Bloomington Police were like, what's this? I didn't want to bother them. They just had that tragic shooting a few days earlier as well. I didn't want to give them another thing to worry about. So I reached out to Sheriff Matthew Lane, kind of explained that everyone has, been punting on this. They passed me around. No one wants to take a look at this. I think there's at least some compelling evidence that this election interference crime was committed by the school districts. And after a few days, he agreed. to open up an official and active investigation that involves assigning a detective, that involves issuing subpoenas to try to get certified copies of all these records that I had taken myself. They had to get certified, authenticity stamps on them. And then since he agreed to pull it up is when I got those FOIA requests back with Barry Riley and his political committee illegally coordinating with the government school districts. So I've also forwarded all that evidence and the FOIA requests to them. The detective I spoke with who's in charge of it, he said they do have to go and do all their subpoenas, and right now they're focused on that illegal election interference wording they're asking voters to approve. But anything else I send them can be used to help inform kind of where their investigation may go. I basically am helping them like paint a picture. I'm giving them like an idea board, and they can kind of like, you know, those boards with all the strings and the dots and stuff, and they can like try to make all these connections. I can kind of do that for them with my information if they want to go that way with the investigation. Hopefully they do look into this illegal coordination as well, because I think that's also just as big of an issue. And he did say, the detective said, after their investigation is complete, whenever that is, which will certainly be after the April 1st election, which is why you should go vote right now and say no between now and April 1st, vote no on the sales tax. He did say he would give all their evidence, everything they collected, to State's Attorney Erica Reynolds, and she would be the one to make the final call whether or not to prosecute based off of the evidence they've gathered. So that's kind of where that investigation is. It'll probably be, I assume, April or maybe even May. So the vote will be long past. Whatever the voters decide will already be law. And either way, maybe this, whether or not it passes or fails, you know, hopefully we can hold some elected officials, some government officials, some political action committees accountable for their immoral and unethical behavior.
Wonderful. Well, Dean, before we go, real quick, give me, you know, some people might be wondering, who is Dean? Who is he? Why does he care so much? Tell me why you care so much.
Yeah. Well, I think a big thing people should know about me is my wife and I, we went to Hillsdale College in Michigan, which is a classical Christian conservative college. They put out a bunch of events and free public information Constitution courses. Like, I love the Constitution. I was an economics and political science major there. So I'm just passionate about the government and protecting individual freedom and individual liberties and making our tax burden as light as possible, and also rooting out public corruption, that sort of thing. So that's kind of like the political aspect. That's kind of why I'm interested in this. From an educational standpoint, my wife and I are a group of families that helped found a new classical Christian school, a private school in town called White Horse Academy. So I serve on the board of directors there. My wife is the head of school and also one of the teachers at the school. My wife's been a elementary school educator for 14 years now. So like, we also understand education. We understand what works and what doesn't work. And we think through that classical Christian model, private half-day school, we can produce, you know, better results than the government schools can when they spend, you know, 4 times as much per student as our tuition. So I think between that educational experience and background, being on a board of a nonprofit of a school, and then also with that kind of a passion for democracy and the constitutional republic we live in, that it just all kind of came together, and this is a perfect thing to pique my interest and keeps me motivated to make sure that justice is done here for the taxpayers.
Yeah, well, Dean, I can't begin to thank you enough. Thanks so much for coming on to the show and sharing all of your information and your work that you've gathered to prove really that there is coordination, at least, going on between this PAC and the government schools. There's also evidence that there was promoting of this referendum on district websites through the April1cent.info. We talked about the tax burden. We talked about the district performance, the district's performances. So you have a blessed day. I appreciate you being on. And folks, as always, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button and share this out. And we'll be back at it tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.